Remember when Halloween wasn't all neon wrappers and plastic pumpkins? When the glow of a porch light meant more than just store-bought candy bars? There was a time, not so long ago, when October nights smelled like molasses, cinnamon, and roasting nuts. When mamas in aprons stirred bubbling pots, wrapped treats in wax paper, and filled paper sacks with love instead of preservatives. These weren't factory sweets. They were homemade memories, passed from porch to porch, from sticky fingers to smiling faces. Tonight, we're remembering those forgotten treasures. 25 Halloween dishes no one seems to make anymore. Molasses popcorn balls. Nothing said Halloween like the sound of molasses bubbling on the stove. Mama would stand there, stirring the syrup until it turned a deep amber, pouring it over mountains of fresh popped corn. The smell, smoky and sweet, drifted through every window. Buttered hands were the only defense, shaping hot, sticky popcorn into heavy golden orbs. They clung to your fingers, glued your lips together, and filled the air with laughter. You didn't just eat them, you earned them, one burn and one grin at a time. Caramel apples on sticks. Before shrink-wrapped kits and glossy factory apples, there were the real ones. Mama melted sugar, butter, and syrup until it turned the color of autumn leaves. She dipped tart orchard apples, one by one, setting them to cool on wax paper while the house filled with the scent of caramel and apples. Some got rolled in crushed peanuts, others in coconut. The fancy ones, maybe a drizzle of melted chocolate. Kids didn't care. They'd bite too soon, crack the glossy coating, and laugh as caramel stuck to their cheeks. Each apple was a badge of Southern pride, sticky, homemade, and worth the wait. Pralines. No candy tested a mama's patience like pralines. Brown sugar, cream, and pecans danced together in her heaviest pot, bubbling and hissing. You had to know when to stop stirring. 1 second too long and it turned to cement. When she got it right, spoonfuls hit wax paper and cooled into discs that were soft in the middle, crumbly on the edge. Every family had its secret: a drop of vanilla, a whisper of cinnamon. Wrapped and handed to wide-eyed trick-or-treaters, pralines weren't just candy. They were heritage. Coconut haystacks. A spoon, a bowl, and a bag of coconut. That's all it took. Mama's melted sugar, or chocolate, stirred in shredded coconut, and dropped them in clusters that looked like tiny hay piles. Some tinted them orange, others dusted them with cocoa. They were chewy, stringy, and sweet enough to glue your teeth together. But kids loved them. They were the taste of harvest season, of hay rides, and home. Homemade divinity. Divinity wasn't just candy. It was a test of patience and weather. On cool nights, mamas beat egg whites until stiff, drizzling in hot syrup until glossy clouds formed. Drop by drop, she made tiny pillows of sweetness, pressing a pecan on top or tinting them ghostly purple for the season. They melted on your tongue like sugar clouds, so light you almost doubted they were real. Rare, delicate, and gone in a blink, divinity lived up to its name: taffy pulls. When Halloween fell on a cool evening, you could bet someone's kitchen turned into a taffy battlefield. Kids buttered their hands, stretched glossy ropes of sugar until they shone pale and perfect. Laughter bounced off the walls as candy snapped, tangled, and flew across the room. Later, when wrapped in wax paper, each chewy piece carried the memory of that night: sticky hands, laughter, and the sweet reward of your own labor. Cornflake peanut butter bar. Born of thrift and ingenuity, these chewy squares turned leftover cornflakes into gold. Mama mixed peanut butter, sugar, and syrup, poured it over crushed flakes, and pressed it into pans. Sometimes she drizzled chocolate on top if she had a spare bar. They were salty, sweet, and gone too soon. Heavy in the hand, sticky on the fingers, and worth more than any candy bar in the bag. Pecan brittle. You could hear brittle break from across the kitchen. Sugar and corn syrup boiled until golden. A handful of pecans tossed in just before the pour. Once cooled, it shattered into jagged amber pieces sharp enough to chip a tooth. But kids didn't mind. That crunch was Halloween's battle cry. Each shard, wrapped in wax paper, gleamed like stained glass under the porch light. Pumpkin bread in foil. The queens of generosity were the mamas who baked pumpkin bread. Heavy loaves spiced with nutmeg, cinnamon, and clove, sliced thick and wrapped in foil. Sometimes raisins or walnuts made their way in, but the real treasure was the smell, warm pumpkin and spice that could stop you in your tracks. Kids unwrapped them before they got home, the silver shining under streetlights like a gift from fall itself. Popcorn balls with candy corn. Inside, some mamas couldn't resist a twist. They folded candy corn into the sticky popcorn mixture, so each bite hit a surprise. The colors glowed through the syrup like tiny jewels. Wrapped in wax paper, they looked like ornaments for a sugary Christmas tree. Simple, cheap, perfect. Homemade fudge squares. Chocolate, sugar, butter. 3 ingredients that demanded respect. Stir too long and it turned grainy. Too short and it stayed gooey. But when Mama got it right, fudge came out smooth as silk, melting on your tongue like pure happiness. Some made peanut butter fudge, others added walnuts or marshmallows. Every piece, heavy and square, felt like treasure. Kids didn't trade it, they hoarded it. Cider donuts. If you've ever bitten into a fresh cider donut, still warm and dusted with cinnamon sugar, you know what autumn tastes like. Mama fried them in oil while apple-scented steam fogged the windows. They went straight from pan to paper bag, still sizzling. Kids licked sugar off their fingers and smiled with powdered sugar grins. No candy could compete with something that warm and real. Cinnamon candy apples. The fiery cousins of caramel apples. Glossy red, hard as glass, and spiced to make your tongue tingle. Biting into one was an act of bravery. The crunch, the heat, the sweetness, the sting, all in one mouthful. They stained your lips red and made your eyes water, but you always came back for more. Gingerbread cookies in pumpkin shapes. Before orange frosting and sprinkles took over, gingerbread cookies ruled Halloween. Rolled thin, cut into pumpkins and bats, baked until the edges crisped and the kitchen smelled like molasses and spice. No fancy decorations, just flavor. The kind of cookie that stayed soft in the middle, crisp at the edge, and gone before morning. Caramel corn in paper cones. Sweet, buttery, and sticky enough to stay in your teeth for hours, caramel corn was the crowd pleaser of every Halloween party. Mama poured it into handmade cones folded from grocery bags. The brown paper darkened with sugar grease. Kids carried them like prizes, the smell of buttered sugar following them down the street. Prune or date pinwheel cookies. These weren't flashy, but they had soul. Rolled dough filled with spiced fruit, sliced into perfect little spirals. The filling was rich, sticky, and old-fashioned, a taste from Grandma's pantry. Kids might wrinkle their noses, but adults knew better. Those cookies tasted like October itself. Rock candy crystals. Before candy stores sold rainbow sticks, there was Mama's kitchen experiment. Jars of sugar water on the counter, growing crystals day by day. The waiting made it sweeter. When the sugar finally clung to the string, it looked like edible diamonds. Clear, fragile, and beautiful. Patience never tasted so good. Buttered popcorn in brown bags. Not every Halloween needed sugar. Sometimes the best gift was warm buttered popcorn poured straight into paper bags. The butter soaked through before you made it home, leaving fingerprints on your costume and a smell that lingered all night. Simple, salty, comforting. Proof that love didn't always come coated in sugar. Popcorn was the kind of treat that brought everyone together. Mama would heat oil in her biggest pot, waiting for that first pop that signaled the start of the show. The sound came in bursts, soft at first, then wild and joyful, like laughter echoing through the kitchen. She'd shake the pot with both hands, careful not to burn it, then pour the steaming kernels into a big tin bowl. Salt fell like snow while melted butter shimmered across the top, each kernel glistening under the light. She'd scoop the popcorn into brown paper bags, folding the tops tight to keep the warmth in. Some mamas added a little chili powder or garlic salt, giving it a twist that made you lick your fingers clean. Kids tore into the bags before they reached the next house, trading candy for a handful of something real. By the end of the night, only the buttery smell remained, soft proof that the simplest snacks often made the strongest memories. Spiced applesauce cake squares. Moist, fragrant, and dusted with powdered sugar, applesauce cake was a humble masterpiece. Mama baked it in big pans, cut it into squares, and wrapped them tight. One bite, and you could taste fall: cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, and a hint of apple. It wasn't fancy, but it filled you up in the best way. Applesauce cake wasn't about show. It was about comfort. Mama would stir the batter slowly, the wooden spoon scraping the bowl in a rhythm that felt like home. The smell hit you before the cake was even done, masita, that rich, spicy perfume that wrapped around the whole house and made neighbors drop by just to check in. Sometimes she folded in chopped nuts or raisins if the pantry allowed, but even plain, it was perfection. When the cake cooled, she'd slice it into thick, generous squares and dust them with powdered sugar that fell like the season's first frost. Wrapped in wax paper, the slices felt like little gifts of warmth. Kids unwrapped them right there on the sidewalk, powdered sugar drifting in the wind like ghosts. Sweet, soft, and steady. Applesauce cake didn't just feed your stomach, it fed your soul. Toasted pumpkin seeds. While the jack-o'-lanterns came to life on the porch, pumpkin seeds roasted in the oven, salted and golden. Kids ate them shell and all, lips burning with salt, laughter echoing through the kitchen. They were the savory bite that balanced all that sweetness. The taste of autumn turned crunchy. Mama never wasted a thing. After carving pumpkins, she'd scoop out the seeds, rinse them in the sink until they gleamed, then spread them across an old baking sheet slick with oil. The oven hissed and popped as they toasted, the scent of warm salt and roasted pumpkin filling every corner of the house. Sometimes she'd toss them with a little garlic or a dash of paprika, just enough to make you reach for one more handful. They came out hot and golden, still crackling from the pan, poured into bowls that never stayed full for long. Kids would gather around, fingers shiny with salt, fighting for the last crunchy bit, simple, homemade, and gone in minutes. Those seeds tasted like the heart of fall itself, proof that even leftovers could become something worth remembering. Molasses cookies. Dark, chewy, and full of spice. Molasses cookies were the smell of October itself, crisp at the edges, soft in the middle, and rolled in sugar that sparkled like frost. Each bite carried smoke, sweetness, and the memory of home. A cookie that didn't need frosting to shine. Mama always said you could tell the season by the smell of her kitchen. When the first batch of molasses cookies hit the oven, you knew Halloween was near. The syrup poured thick and slow, dark as midnight, mixing with ginger, cloves, and cinnamon until the dough turned the color of burnt amber. The cookies puffed and cracked as they baked, filling the house with warmth deeper than any candle's glow. When she pulled them from the oven, the air turned sweet and smoky all at once, a scent that clung to curtains and memory alike. She'd let them cool on a wire rack just long enough to tease, then slip a few into wax paper for trick-or-treaters. They weren't flashy or perfect, but they were honest. Cookies that tasted like fall, family, and everything good that time refuses to forget. Penuche candy. The quiet cousin of fudge, made with brown sugar instead of cocoa. Warm, buttery, and caramel-colored, penuche melted the second it hit your tongue. It didn't shout for attention, but those who loved it never forgot it. It was sweetness whispered, not shouted. Mama made it on quiet afternoons when the weather turned cool and the kitchen begged for something rich. The pot would simmer low, the sugar and butter turning silky and golden, filling the air with a toffee scent that wrapped around you like a blanket. When poured and cooled, it cut into soft squares that glistened in the lamplight. Smooth, humble, perfect deep. Cornmeal cookies, granny cookies. The kind your grandmother always had cooling on a rack. Golden, crisp, and a little gritty from the cornmeal, they tasted like nostalgia. Simple, sturdy, and meant to last, if you could resist them that long. Every bite carried a bit of home, a reminder that the simplest things often linger the longest. Cornmeal cookies weren't fancy, but they had character. The kind that came from cast iron pans and time-worn recipes scribbled on index cards. Granny would cream butter and sugar with a wooden spoon, humming a hymn while the dough came together, the faint crunch of cornmeal mixing with the soft rhythm of her song. She'd drop spoonfuls onto a baking sheet, the edges browning first, the center staying tender and warm. The smell was impossible to forget. Buttery, toasty, and just a little sweet, like sunshine caught in dough. Kids would hover, trying to sneak one before they cooled, burning their fingers but smiling anyway. Once cooled, she'd stack them in tins lined with wax paper, saving a few for Halloween night. Wrapped in paper and slipped into a treat bag, they were humble but precious. The kind of cookie that whispered of patience, love, and a kitchen that never stopped giving. Old-fashioned pull candy and ribbon taffy. There was always one neighbor who made the old ways look easy. Pull candy gleamed like glass, stretched and twisted until it snapped into shimmering ribbons. It looked like something from a candy shop window. Too pretty to eat, but too tempting to resist. One bite, and it dissolved into sweetness and memory. You could always tell when it was pull candy night. The whole block smelled of sugar and vinegar, that tangy scent that meant something magical was happening in her kitchen. She'd heat the syrup until it bubbled like molten gold, then pour it onto buttered marble slabs to cool just enough for hands to touch. Her fingers moved quick, pulling, folding, and twisting the candy in rhythmic motions, the light from the lamp catching every glossy strand. Kids would gather on her porch, wide-eyed, watching the ribbons form, waiting for their turn to taste. Sometimes she'd twist the strands into braids or curl them into little loops, each one a miniature masterpiece. When she finally handed out the cooled pieces, they cracked between your teeth like brittle glass and melted slow, leaving behind nothing but sweetness, and the quiet feeling that you just tasted a piece of time itself. Sweet potato pie squares. Warm, spiced, and wrapped in wax paper, these little squares tasted like every southern kitchen rolled into one. The filling was smooth, the crust flaky, the smell heavenly. You didn't trade these, you savored them. Each square was comfort disguised as dessert. Mama didn't make them in a hurry. She started early, boiling the sweet potatoes until they were soft enough to mash with a fork. The kitchen filled with steam and that faint earthy scent that only sweet potatoes have, humble and grounding. She'd stir in brown sugar, butter, eggs, and a dash of vanilla, tasting the mixture to make sure it was just right. A pinch more cinnamon, maybe a whisper of nutmeg, because perfection wasn't in the recipe. It was in the feel. The crust came next, flaky, golden, rolled by hand, and pressed into pans that had seen 1,000 pies before. When the squares baked, the whole house smelled like October, warm, sweet, and a little smoky from the oven edges browning just so. When they cooled, Mama cut them into perfect squares, wrapped each in wax paper, and tied them with twine if she was feeling fancy. Some were still warm when they hit the treat bags, their aroma sneaking through the folds. Kids would open them before they got home, standing under the porch light with sugar-dusted lips, realizing this wasn't just dessert, it was love, baked and wrapped for Halloween night. When you think about it, Halloween back then wasn't just about the candy, it was about the hands that made it, about the kitchens glowing with orange light, the sound of spoons scraping pots, and the laughter of neighbors gathered close. Every dish told a story, of thrift, of care, of celebration. These forgotten recipes may have vanished from the porch lights, but not from memory. They were the flavor of community, of simpler times when the sweetest part of Halloween wasn't what you got, it was what someone made for you. So tell me, which of these dishes did you grow up with? And which one do you wish would make a comeback? Drop your memories down in the comments below. Because somewhere between the molasses and the caramel, the popcorn and the pralines, lies the real spirit of Halloween, homemade, heartfelt, and unforgettable.